All right, welcome back to Valuable and Vibrant Talk, the podcast. We're so excited to have our special guest for this week. Hey, listen, so this is just something that I've really been waiting on. My special guest this week is my sister-in-law, and this is a person that I bounce ideas off of. I've been accountability partners with. We have hosted events together, and I'm just so glad and thankful to God for this connection, and really just someone that has always sound wisdom, a wise word. Even will tell me when I'm out of line and I'm wrong. We had to, go blow to blow the other week on over tacos on some stuff that I was doing, but I always appreciate the accountability because guess what? When you're trying to get better, you need somebody in your corner that's going to tell you you're doing a great job, but also, hey, let's make some tweaks here. So without further ado, please welcome Mrs. Alicia Wade, my sister-in-law. Welcome.
Thank you. I feel a warm welcome. So thank you for that.
Yes, man. We have been trying to align these calendars and get everything together, but so glad that you're coming in and really just want to talk about just a lot of things that we've had our conversations about running ideas off of each other. But just as far as we just came out of Women's History Month and just want to give you a salute because you're doing some big things in your career and as also in entrepreneurship, and just want to appreciate, the strides that you're taking. Some people have everything that they're doing on Front Street. You're not necessarily that person, but I'm aware of what all you're doing, and I just want people to know that there are some Black women doing some amazing, awesome things. And let's just throw it back to last year, your TED Talk. Man, what a great thing to be able to witness, and just seeing people that are making strides, doing things, and really like trying to stretch themselves and become better. So salute to you before we get into the combo.
Thank you. I love to be in the mentions. When we think about women history, I think History's Month, I think we also, for me, I don't always think about current things. Like you think about people that have done, and to your point of like making history, like
Yeah.
it's somebody else's story. So yeah, that's super
Yeah,
dope.
I love it. I love it. So, you and I have had a lot of conversations, just on the sideline about a lot of things from, you know, this to that, from A to Z. But I wanted to just park here, on the topic of emotional intelligence. We've seen so many things in the media, we've seen so many things in the news, we've seen so many things that's just unfolded over the last year. And with the emergence of COVID and everything that people have gone through, I think it's been just an interesting journey seeing how people have had to sit with their emotions, sit with their feelings, take time, and really just think about what they're thinking about. And so, I know that you're in a professional capacity in retail, but also just your personal, your new development as far as HR and your consulting. And so you see people, you have to deal with people on a different level in terms of like, is this person a good hire? Is this a good person to have on my team? Can you talk to us and just what are your thoughts on emotional intelligence? What do you know it to be, and kind of how do you use it in your day-to-day,
Yeah,
day-to-day dealings?
for sure. Well, definitely a broad spectrum, right? So I think, in my profession, or at least I'll say in my company, we always start with definitions. And on some sense, I think it's also it's interesting to me. I'm like, to your point on thinking about what you're thinking about is who even defined that, right? Like I've been even going to the origin of different things. So I'll start there and go with my understanding. So when I looked up emotional intelligence, um, this is for all of those my wordsmiths out there
Mhm, mhm,
and words that matter. It has the capacity to be aware of, comma,
mhm,
control, comma, and express one's emotions. But it
mhm.
goes on, there's another and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, just when because when you reached out to me, right? Like the first thing I thought about, like I wrote down was like several layers and levels. And then I put using measured by relationships, and I went through all these things. And then when I looked at this definition, I was just like, oh my gosh, like if you just master one of these, it
Yes.
would be amazing, right? Like, so even if you just had the capacity to be aware, right? Or control, So wow. So I guess I'll start from like a professional standpoint, and then I think I do want us to tap into just the past year, and to your point around thinking about what you're thinking about and how to balance all these things that are thrown. So I guess in a work environment, at least through the capacity that I've been in and tried to explore and want to going forward, I don't know if there's one place to start. I think, EQ, some, companies obviously call it that. But I feel like it's undervalued.
Huh.
And, because there's a lot of people that have a very deep knowledge about something or subject matter, and they can excel in their career. For instance, if you're an accountant, right? And you know that. But you may not have, to your point, emotional intelligence. And usually we think about that in being good with people, whatever that means, right? But I think that's usually obviously there's a lot of tests and things you can look at, but I just feel like at the end of the day, it's something you can feel. And the
Yeah.
first part, it just goes down to being authentic. And, a lot of time, which I know we're going to unpack, but I want to
Yes.
make this comment and I'm going to leave it right there is I think being authentic and people hiding behind, I'm just me, or this is how I am, are two different things.
Wait, wait. You
So,
went in early, man.
yes.
This is just how I am. Okay, so that I feel has been a crutch for so many people for so long. Just and to what you said about, okay, we have authenticity, and then we also have that's just how I am. So, what is, man? What are your thoughts on that long standing? I mean, for years, for generations, we've heard professionals, we've heard family members say, "Oh, that's just how I am. You got to accept me." What are your thoughts on how that kind of is problematic?
Yeah, I think thinking of it through the lens of it being problematic is several levels for me. And I think you started off with like just being accountability partners. I think that has been two ways. And I think that's why we've been able to, grow together, learn together, call each other out. And
Yeah.
calling out hasn't been about you're wrong. It's more of like, I hear this.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
you said this, I want to come back to you said that mattered. I don't see that, right? Or tell me more, about that. So calling out doesn't mean of like a scolding,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
but I say that to say this is how I am puts an immediate block to that. Because someone may be feeling a way to how you're showing up, and you may not even be intending that, but you can't even have conversation about it by saying that's just how I am, right? And I think sometimes we think that's a loud, bold. Sometimes that's just a detached. Like you can't be that either. Like what's going on? So I think that's my first thought. Like I think it's problematic because you shut off anybody being able to feel how you're showing up, them being able to deal with that, and especially if you have a position over them, right? Like if you're an aunt and they're your niece, if you're the mother and they're the son, like that, you can't, like that right there is a block to say, and you may not be meaning it, but you are now shutting off anybody to experience you other than how you want to be experienced.
Wow, that's good. You're shutting off people from experiencing you the way other than the way you want to be experienced. So that is a very important, we'll just put a pin right there. That's a important dynamic that we see unfolding, especially as we talk about generations. We talk about women's history. We talk about the women in our lives and the women that, we grew up around, our mothers, our aunts, and all of these different women figures. And so with the evolution of these relationships, and to use that phrase, the emotional intelligence is a lot more, it's almost like a buzz phrase right now. But I just wonder how that I wonder if that's an uncomfortable place to be for that generation, and to really tap in past, that's just how I am, to really tap in and say, hey, you know what? I might should have done this differently. Talk about like what do you think, and what from your observance, like what do you observe about these generations, like, grandmother, mother, aunts, to down to us. Man, I see a struggle in terms of being able to really tap in and be vulnerable, to be authentic, and again, like you said, to allow somebody to experience me past how I want to show up.
Like, I guess I start with like the positive there, like, and to
Yeah.
your point of how we started this off, like in a work environment, because I think about so many older women that I worked with
Yeah.
that were just so loving and just did so much. And I
Mm.
look back and I'm thankful for it now. Like, I think about my first job, and it was this lady, her name was Missy Ratha, and I don't know where she is to this day.
Oh,
It
wow.
was just such a blessing, like, in small ways. She would be off. I made way more money than her, right? But she was much more of a blessing. She knew, like, most of the people there were college students. She would bring food every Sunday. This lady did not have money. Like, she would bring trays of food. She
Wow.
knew, and she was like, "Well, your mom's not here." Like, for her, love was Sunday. So if
Yeah.
we had to work or we did that, she couldn't understand that. And I share that as an example, starting from the positive, that if you didn't see that part of Miss Hiratha, you got Hurricane Hiratha. Like,
Wow. Okay.
so it was same motion of in love and ownership and those things, but she couldn't correct that part because it was like, this just who I am. And it was
Mm.
all of that, right? So I think a lot of times, to your point, and then I think about, obviously other examples to, as people kind of flashing in my mind,
Yeah.
to think about that, and even ourselves, to your point, in that a lot of times I find, and if I speak specifically for Black women, in my opinion, I think the rub, if we're talking about that part, is that we end up doing a lot of things that nobody asked us to do. And we're mad about it. Like, nobody told you to go do all that,
Yeah.
And that's where
Yeah.
I think that's how I see it a lot of times, in the misunderstood. That is an emotional intelligence, right? The capacity to hold your emotions here and not put that on someone else, a burden of, you don't understand all that I've thought about to give you this small token. Maybe that person doesn't have a capacity to even, or the bandwidth, right, to
Yeah.
understand all of the different layers of love or correction or ownership or whatever that is. And that's what I would say is the um, like, to your point of being able to unpack this is how I am. Because I
Yeah.
think that's what they're trying to say, but it's not coming across that way.
Yeah, but something that I've also just thought about is just on a very like basic level is just, I'll say our generation, we have so many more tools available to say, hey, you know, just your emotions are important. To say rest is important. To say, oh, how you're feeling in your body is important. Like take the time. And I just think the generations above us were just so, I don't think they had the language or the tools or even the permission to say, hey, I'm feeling tired in my body. I need rest.
Mhm.
And it was like a switch that, I need rest, but I'm all of a sudden I'm upset or I'm angry, I'm exhausted. And so I think just, appreciative of the permission that we have in this generation to just feel like, man, I'm not having the best day emotionally, and being able to verbalize that and say, hey, today is not the best day, but I'm still here. So I think, and even talking to some of my older aunts and mother and grandmother and different things, like there's such a I will say maybe even stigma, just like you won't allow yourself to be vulnerable. and,
Mhm.
and to what you just said of doing the absolute most of stuff that nobody asked you to do. And so now you're like feeling a type of way. So I think there's just so many layers, but also just the permission that we have in today's generation, in the culture that says, hey, rest is important, self-care is important, my emotions are important. And to be able to verbalize and clearly articulate how we're feeling versus just being in a tailspin and a in a rage about some things that you can't even articulate or say out of your mouth.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think if I were to underscore a word that you said is permission. And I
Yeah.
totally agree. Like I think back and to your point of like just the structure you gave of thinking back, right, of those generations is they didn't have that, and I'm more aware of that now at my age. And then I think you think also if you think about particularly for Black women, we haven't been free from slavery longer than we were slaves.
Come on.
We're still having first. So if we unpack that of your mother, right, one generation away, or someone's grandmother may have been the first and only Black secretary.
Mm,
Secretary,
yeah.
not VP, not petroleum engineer. Like they
Wow.
had to go through those lengths to serve and so when we think about for me, I think if we go back to that, I feel like it was such a burden for us to show up right, you know what I mean? And I think that's why this unleashing of I need a nap.
Yes.
The whole ministry, I want to lay down, I can't do it. And I think because we are feeling all of those things, and I think there's just such a burden, and they were not given the permission to not have your hair done, not have on this attire, for your socks not to be bleached sparkling white. What do you mean? And I think I think we also have to go to younger generations where that emotional intelligence is really a total pendulum swing of you have total buttoned up,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then there's a whole twerking ministry, right? That
Wow.
letting it all. I just want to have joy. I just want to be free. So I think the key word for me is permission. You know what I mean? Like I totally agree. Like I think at the end of the day, that is really what it is. But it goes back to your point of personally knowing how do you show up in all of those spaces.
Absolutely. And I think that's very, very important. Something that we have to constantly be aware of how we show up, but also just that buzzword again, like permission to, hey, like there's this Mary J. Blige, like take me how I am, and not in a dismissive way. Like I'm constantly working. I want to get better. I'm working on my growth areas, but also like I'm tired. I'm
Mhm.
exhausted, and just having that permission to um, feel what you feel, but
But I
also
think if I can go back to your point, if we're using Mary in this sense, right? Because music is a love language for me.
yes,
For those kind of from an intro, I think music, it definitely whether it's anything from like an ear standpoint, so
uh-huh,
podcast, anything like that to consume is a love language. But
got it.
I think to your point around Mary is like it first started with her saying that. No one
Hmm.
is the owner of being able to read our minds or take a temperature check about what's going on with us. So if you want that and you're asking for permission, what are you asking for permission from or for, right? So to say I'm pissed off at my husband because he didn't put the baby down, did you ask him? Did you
Right.
ask him? Right.
That
So now
part.
so like it goes back to that part of handling relationships. You're responsible for how you manage this relationship, not the other person. So you need to go get a nap. Don't be mad because you haven't taken one because you didn't ask. But I think it goes to your point of acknowledging we weren't allowed to do that.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. But it's even it's deeply ingrained in the culture because like, and I just remember hearing like my grandfather used to say, "Oh, you sleeping in the middle of the day?" Like,
oh yeah,
this is when I lived next door to him at a point, and Bailey was very small at that point. She was probably, and it was a Saturday. I distinctly remember like, oh, I can't take a nap. Like, it's not okay that I take a nap in the middle of the day because I need to be doing something. But it's just around that level of like being productive at all times, and that's just something that's it's a lot to absorb.
yeah. That's something I've struggled with throughout my life because I had to acknowledge that was a value of mine. Kind
Mm,
of like where I had took it on overdrive. Like I think when my just to your point, like thinking about my father and my like hard work and
yeah.
you should do these things, like that was a great thing, right? But overused it was not, and I had to come back to that if you do not always have to be busy. In fact, I had to have a self-talk yesterday because I was like I started at maybe like 5:30, it was maybe 2:30, and I was about to keep going for the day, and I felt bad and I was like, the shift is over.
Yeah.
Why are you needing to do this? So it was like no one had asked me to do that, but it was just ingrained of if it's not hard, right, or if it's not this effort, it's like stepping back to
Wow.
go through and say, okay, let's talk about effort versus impact. Because
Mm.
I'm tired, if this is not done when you get there, right, you're going to have an attitude. You're not going to show up in love and in your best, right? Is that person going to receive it? And I was like, you know what? This is not a good idea right now.
Wow. Okay, so I just want you to say that again. So impact versus effort.
Yes.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
good.
That's
That's
been something I've been really, and it's to your point from a work environment that we've been talking a lot about. And it's really hard, especially when you talk about people that are doers.
Mhm.
And they can do, right? And so when you talk about a relationship, oh, if my love language is cooking for you and going to do this for you or picking, I did all of this for you, do. But then if somebody's asking you to be different,
Wow.
that is very different. Like I just want you to not talk to me like that.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's very hard. So I think it's, it unpacks that doing versus being, and it's not a this or that. Like you do have to do both. Like you just can't drive your kids to school with a funky attitude, right?
Right.
And cursing them as they get out, but talking about you're this great mom.
Right. You're gonna have to pick one.
Pick,
Pick one.
just be quiet.
Man,
So, but for sure.
that's so good. So I think, and you and I have talked about this before offline, but like I've experienced, it's namely in my teen years, I experienced a plethora of things that had me that I feel tapping into emotional intelligence before, um, maybe some of my peers were, because
Mm,
I was in therapy and was having to verbalize, oh, this happened and I feel this way about it, or this happened and I feel like I want to do X, Y, and Z because of that. And I remember you kind of just speaking of your journey, and I think, a lot of times there's so much pride in Black families around, our young people going away off to college, away from their family. Um, and I think there's also a level of like just we forget to kind of address the emotional needs that these older teenagers slash young adults have, going away to college. So, just would you
mm,
share just a few thoughts around, your journey early with emotional intelligence, maybe being away from the family when you went off to college,
mm,
some of those things, or
yeah.
just any thoughts you have around like, you know, what skills are needed to even be able to successfully go out?
Yeah, that's wow, that's definitely a lot to think about because you got to kind of transport yourself back to the 18-year-old you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I had been very developed as an athlete. I had a lot of experience and I was very confident in who I was as a person that ran track. You
Okay.
know, so I go back to that, and that was very clear for me. And I think, when you think as a parent, you're thinking that's your job to prepare in that standpoint. I definitely feel like I was prepared in regards to life skills, being able to cook, clean, for all those things. But you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think really for me, wow, like through that journey, like going back is knowing what your resources are, right?
Mm.
And really knowing how to use those. So, like, if I start with growing up in the church, we always went to church, right? And reading the Bible. But did I really know in college, to your point, as a, you know, teen, young adult, that was a major tool? I
Okay.
won't say that I knew that because I went through a severe depression my first year in college. Like,
Wow. Okay.
really, oh my God, it's like it can bring me to tears now. And it was because of who I thought I was, or that same, image that I give you, right? Like people can see a very strong body,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that was crumbled,
Wow.
crumbled, I tell you.
Really? Oh, wow.
Okay, tore the hell down. And I say this because, even as a parent, like my parents were not able to help me in that standpoint because who is this person? Like I've been very capable, very confident, can do this. And I think that's probably the biggest piece that I would say to your point of emotional journey of knowing where those things are. And it's a Bible verse that comes up. And I've been thinking about is like when you think about those things, forgetting those things that are behind, right? And I think a lot of times I've read that through the lens of bad things. Let it go.
Mm, mm.
And the journey was forgetting all of those accolades because none of those medals, none of those titles, traveling literally the entire United States. My parents can attest this, my brother,
Yeah.
and that none of that mattered. None of that. I had to forget those victories because I had to win every day, right? And
Wow.
that was the emotional journey of like those just basic tools of that were in your toolkit to use and using your words. So that's what I would go back to. So I think if there's any young adults looking at this now, a lot of times I feel like it comes out in anger, like it's either suppressed or it's really loud. That just if you can find somebody that you trust, and maybe that it's a neutral party, and maybe counseling is too strong, or you don't feel like you're there yet, find a neutral person just that can sit down with you to help you go through your thoughts to organize because at that age you feel like everything is so final. I got to make a decision today. I got to know, right? And I think if you could sit down with somebody, they probably are going to point you back to trusted people, right? Like, go talk. That person loves you. Go talk to them, but you don't want to let them down at that age, right?
Wow.
So I think that's the journey at that age. Like I think back to like, wow, like it was a lot of work that I didn't even realize, and then you realize
Yeah.
all the people that were in your life that helped you navigate that.
Man, that's really good. But I think it's very important because I recently saw a meme that's floating around just
Mhm.
talking about and not necessarily for college, but I think saying putting people out the house at 18 is some type of generational, or it's just that there is so much more development that needs to happen. And so to your point of when you are going away for college and learning learning your footing, that there does need to be a trusted party that you can just bounce some ideas off of. And
Because you're trying to hide things is not the answer. It is not the answer. And you can, even though you're grown, you're not, you do not know.
yes,
And
that's
people
so
get
good.
caught up in some real long, they're making short-term decisions.
Yeah.
And we talk about this a lot of people underestimate or overestimate what they can do in a year, but underestimate what they can do in 5 years. And
Yeah.
that, when I tell you, is the explanation point of like a lesson during that time.
Wow. Wow. That's really good. I want to kind of switch gears and go here. We have seen, especially this week, on the internet,
Mm.
so many different things play out on the internet.
What a
Um,
joke.
what a joke, right?
Yes.
But namely, there's a couple that recently broke up, a celebrity couple, I guess rapper couple or whatever, and there was also a married couple that came out with the confession and XYZ. And so what you see on the internet is people choosing sides of a story and choosing to cancel certain people. And so we've got cancel culture in full effect. With that being said, how have and I know we're kind of beyond that, but like, how have you been able to navigate and sustain like lasting and impactful friendships, relationships with, cancel? Like, do you believe in cancel culture? Do you believe like folks need to be canceled at times? And then how does that apply? Like, we're not talking about just surface things, like real people that are in your life that have, disappointed you, and maybe, made a decision that you didn't agree with. Okay, is cancel culture, is that healthy? Is that emotionally intelligent? Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not going to sit here on this podcast and act like I have not had that spirit. You know,
Right.
it feels good to block. It feels good to just take a whole contact out your phone. And there's some people, if they can admit as they're listening to this, they can think of that. And there's probably friends, connections we have that are going to hear this, that they like, what's she about to say? So
Right.
I
Let's
definitely,
keep it 100.
yeah, I'm keeping 100. I have, however, in being kind of accountable and clear, like I don't believe in that today, right?
Yeah.
What I do feel is, we've talked about this around how to maturely and professionally put people in their place,
Right.
right?
Right.
And what I mean by putting people in their place is everybody doesn't need a front seat to your life, A,
That.
right? And that doesn't make them toxic because
Right.
they aren't happy you had a baby. They aren't happy you got promoted. They're just not there. They have some other things going on, right? So
Yes.
that's number one for me when I think of cancel culture, right? Because me not dealing with you in this way anymore doesn't mean I canceled you. Then it goes to my second thought of that of like, it's okay to grow and mature, right?
Yeah.
And especially when I think about like, relationships you've had as a childhood, like people love to tell no new friends, no new friends. Okay, well, maybe your childhood friend from junior high is not going to serve you today in the same way they did then, and vice versa, right? So, like, it's okay to mature and, need different things. And also, and I say move in different circles based on that. Like if this is a group that I love to share reading with, I can't be upset that you and I can't share books with each other, and now we can't be in relationship as sister-in-laws because I don't like the same books, right? So that's the next thing. But I think to your point around like all that's on the internet, the buzzing of it, is if people learned how to put people in their places of this is not your relationship model.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're out of line.
Yeah.
You're out of line. That person, you made them that. You put them and created an idol out of them, right? So I think that has to be thought about. But I think that goes back to looking at yourself, which we could get into that. But I think the biggest part for me is sometimes like I go back to boundaries, and there are some people that don't know how to I don't want to say uphold, but even understand where you're coming from, right? Like, so examples of you have friends that don't, or family members that don't respect your time, like you're a married person and they're calling you at this time of night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you're a cousin, you can't call her at this time and ask her to get out of her bed to go do that. Maybe as a single person, they could be there to, you can't do that. We can't do
Right.
that, right? So I think for me at this point, to answer your question, then we can open it up, is I go to there's some relationships that people may feel like it's canceled or like in my life, and it's not. It's just for me to respect you and honor you, we have to deal with each other in this way. And that may not be as frequent. And it's
Yeah.
okay. It's really
That's
okay.
okay. That's
I can love this person or respect you in this standpoint, but that doesn't mean every part of my life has to be integrated with you.
and that's so good, I think. And it's very it goes back to us being able to have permission to put people in their proper places in our lives. And it's not bad, it's not wrong. And really, if you break it, I mean, if you break it all the way down, a lot of the turmoil and distress that we experience as it relates to relationships and family and friendships and all of that is because, like you said, everybody's sitting on the front row. Everybody's, first in line. Everybody's just right here.
Right.
Need 100% of,
Yeah, and like for instance, your siblings shouldn't have to be able to even think they have the audacity to think that they can be a a key stakeholder in your marriage. You're
right,
not making decisions over here, right? Like,
right.
and that doesn't mean that I don't love you in this sense, right? But
Yeah,
I think those kind of, that's what I mean by boundaries. Like, you have to think, I can't, even though you came first per se, right? And a lot of people put that out there. Oh, I was your friend. you're not over my husband. You're not
Right.
over my wife. Like, we have to think about those things.
Well, and also just to take it a step further, I mean, just what I'm seeing in the culture and namely on the internet, but like people are very, I'll say fluid, or
Mhm.
well, I also say people have different views and different takes on what marriage is and what it, should be or how it should play out. And so, excuse me, when you hop in line, number one, thinking, oh, I was with you since we was in middle school, so I want to say this or want you to apply this. Like, no, no, no. That's not even how that is that relationship is can't work like that. So I think it's also because everybody is with their own interpretation of how this goes and how that goes and how this goes. So it's really important to clearly be able to say, okay, what version of marriage are we doing? Okay, what version of friendship are we doing? What is, what version of parent child or parent, daughter son uh, thing are we doing? So I think that's also a part of just being able to be clear with your expectations, being clear with your experiences, and also, like you said, use your words. We're going to have some conversations and say, look, this is how we desire to set this thing up. And the more you are able to have these conversations and use words and use, you know, uh, and this is the thing, and I've experienced this, like, and I've told you about this, but we've had, instances where I've had conversations with family members about just say, something at a holiday schedule. And what's going to happen on the holidays turns into a huge, uncomfortable moment. And what my prayer has been for the longest is just like, I don't desire to have awkward interactions with my family, my close friends, my like I want to be able to say, "Hey, you know what? This and this." Even if I'm on the other side of it, "Hey, that made me feel away. Can we talk about like how to not be here next time?" And I think it's just being able to have those conversations without the because I've had some family members, I might say, okay, well, I'm going to wear this blue shirt today. And this
Mm,
blue shirt is, this is what I'm wearing. And and as a result of me saying I'm going to wear this blue shirt, there's a cutoff
mhm.
to where I'm canceled. And I'm just wondering, like, man, how do you recover from these types of, you know, I don't know, tantrums, emotional outbursts that
Ooh,
people have? Like, man, do I just keep pushing? Do I keep trying? Or is there a point that, like, hey, I love you. I appreciate you, but I'm just going to be over here with this. Like, I'm going to just be over here with my blue shirt? So there are so many things to just unpack, and as it relates to the emotional intelligence, but also what I've learned is sometimes they're just not ready.
yeah, it's a couple of things that are coming up, and I'll start as you were speaking. I'm thinking about, um, I mean, it kind of when I think about some of the best advice I've gotten professionally, and as you were talking, I was going back to a supervisor, and she told me, she's like, you need to learn how to manage your expectations of people.
Wow.
And that, when I tell you, has been life changing. And not that it was a one lesson, right? And I know you talked about this in other episodes of it's a lesson I've learned, but I continue to learn.
Yeah.
And if we start there, to your point, then I feel like what I'm hearing is that person is expecting you to show up in a way, or we're expecting a person to show up in a way and they don't. And
Yeah.
we're let down. And then the cycle goes from there, right? Like, so for instance, someone is thinking someone else, like, and we're using a simple example, right? Should be taking the lead on hosting a holiday.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't know, the person didn't even know, right? Like, they're thinking, and then you have all of these kind of misinformed interactions.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first part you have to do, and you saying point to myself as well, right? But I think the other part that I do want us to like open up on is the tantrums. I struggle with adult tantrums. I really do. I really like where did that start? Like how does that happen? What's your opinion?
I don't know. I mean, and that's just where like, and
And
I
I'm not
don't.
laughing at y'all that do these tantrums. And we probably like to your point, we probably can all reflect on some days you're like, I'm in my feelings. Like my
Yeah.
attitude is bad. But those that don't know, like you're stuck in the tantrum. You're literally in a whole phase of your life where you are on the floor rolling around like a 2-year-old. Look
Yes.
at me. Nobody loves me. Nobody calls me. Nobody does fill in the blank all this for me. And it's like,
Yeah.
make it stop.
But really it becomes so entertaining to me
Oh, you
because
just walk away. To
you know,
your point of
yeah,
walk, let the baby cry it out.
that
I'll be back.
yes.
I'll be back. I'm still
I'm
here.
gonna let
Actually,
you
actually, I won't be. I'm still here. Whenever you calm down.
Imma just let you do that, and Imma just be right here whenever you're done. So, but that,
Oh,
that
man, we got to get better.
managing that for an adult though, I'm not gonna lie, that is draining.
Hmm.
It's draining, and then it also has the ability to make you feel like, "Wait, now am I crazy? Like, I know this is not playing out like this. I just know this is not." And I'll be honest, like specifically in my family of origin, my parents and my sister, we've had to have some conversations in terms of our expectations for one another.
Mm.
And I think the more we have these conversations, it be tight. It's tight in there. Them
Crunchy.
first couple of times it's crunchy. It is like very difficult, but and not to make generalizations, but I think in terms of as a whole, Black families, we've just got to continue to work through these emotional pieces.
Yeah.
And I know tapping into the emotional side, even just being able to verbalize, hey, I feel this way about this, and what do y'all think about it? Like, is this working for us as a unit? Is this working for us as a family? Speaking to my husband about, okay, this is feeling kind of, a little funky over here. Like, having these conversations is so important. But I think that from experience, the more we talk, the more we're able to verbalize and speak to our expectations. There's just a floodgate of like possibility when we stop operating as individual islands over here and just try to you know
Totally. But I think it goes back where we started of with the definition, right?
yeah.
It's the capacity to be aware of,
Mm-hmm.
control, then express. And I
Yes.
think about we start with talking, we start with expressing
Yeah.
when you're not under control, and then you're not even aware of where it started from. So I think if we get in order, right? And I think the first thing, and I do feel like to your point that the devil wants you to be alone. Like
That
that's where you can really get picked apart when you're isolated and you're sitting by yourself. And that's why I think last year was just so either it was profound for people either in an amazing way or in a very traumatic way because to you when you started this up, they were alone with their thoughts. They
yes.
had a chance to really evaluate who am I? What
Mm-hmm.
is important to me? What's not important to me? And sort that out. Or, and that either went to a very dark place or there's some that were like like I'm literally living my best life. Some
Yeah.
things got in order there. So I think if we get in order, right, and start with building our own capacity for things, I think that's where we have to start, particularly to your point in Black families, of how does that happen when we don't want to go to therapy? And when older generations see that as weakness, or
Yeah.
like, once we break those stereotypes down, that it's not telling somebody your business. It's not,
That
they can't tell me nothing. that's not like
Yeah.
that stigma in the Black community. I think in Black families, I think is really what breaks down those things that you're describing.
Oh, and it really it has to stop. It has to stop because we and so many things that I can just think of, like even in my personal life, like growing up, you remember hearing, "Oh, what happens in here stays in here," even if it's And I understand discretion, I understand privacy, I understand, be respecting people's, but some of the toxic and downright criminal things that
Yes.
we're
They
saying,
serve no one, right? Like,
they
you hiding incestual things, right? You hiding, abuse that you took that too far.
yeah, yeah, and I'm thinking of one family member in particular to this day. I mean, and we're talking decades later. She is in anguish because of these things that she's experienced that was never able to be told. And I
Mhm.
grieve for her, but I also have just thought so much about the deeply, deeply ingrained some of the dysfunctional things that we've been taught or just hold in Black families of, you like you said, I'm not gonna sit up there and tell nobody all my business, or I'm not about to sit up here and get advice from a stranger, or we got to cover this person, we don't let everybody know, and I'm just like, I struggle with that, especially because I've experienced sexual abuse and sexual assault, and it's like, hold up, this nothing about that is okay, so I'm just looking.
And I think if you pause, like, I just pause, not to cut you off, but like that goes back to managing expectations, right? So, for instance, of I can't be your counselor. For instance, if you were to tell me about your sexual trauma, I can't relate. I'm not equipped to
Yeah,
help you in that way. And just because someone is your mother, that what do you do with that? Your child is coming to you with something like that, or whatever the relationship is, like that. Like, and if you do have that, God bless you. And not saying it never happens, but I think that's another example of managing expectations of, sure, you're blessed with sisters, right? Or and they can console you and pray for you, but you have to do both. You
that's
absolutely.
so good, so good. I mean, we definitely got to do both. That's just point blank.
So we can heal. But I think it goes to me, like when we talk about emotional intelligence, a big part of it for me, if we unpack this and from a conversation, is you have to reverse engineer it. And
Hmm.
kind of to your point of like my journey with that, obviously when you're young, you don't know what the end game is. End game for you is, getting married, having a baby, getting this job, living in this city, being in
Yeah,
whatever that is. But at this age, right, at 40, 40 plus, the end game is this date or this wholeness. And I think if you start there of, I want to have, to your point, I don't want to have awkward, at minimum, awkward interactions from my
yeah.
family, but I want to operate in love. And then if
Hmm.
we know that this is where we're trying to go, then that's what we need. But I think it goes to another subject of, if that's what we're going to do that, you're going to need leaders, and you also are going to need followers.
Wow.
And that's been something like in our family, particularly in my household, that's something my husband and I have talked about a lot. And, through our marriage, really struggled because of the expectation of like, I thought he should be in this way. Right. And
Mhm,
why can't
mhm.
you both, or you could do this and I think that being clear now on what the end game is, right? And being very clear on, this is what we're trying to do with this child we're raising, or how
Yeah,
we operate, all of the other stuff will sort itself out. Doesn't say it didn't come up, but I think that's how you can then, to your point, go to from like, let me control my emotions, right?
yeah,
This person is at work this amount of time because in their mind, this is how getting here looks.
yes,
I
yes,
don't like it, but
yeah,
and then now we can have a conversation about it.
yeah. That's so good. I think it's so many things to unpack, but I think as we continue to just raise awareness, have the conversations, build safe places within our family units that it's like, hey, we need to have this conversation. And it's not so I can attack you. It's not so somebody can, blame you, but it's like, let's get this out here and let's grow and learn together and all, become our best self. So I think it's so many things that we have capacity to be better, but if you don't, what was the saying? You can't heal what you don't reveal.
Mm.
I think Dr. Darius Daniel said that on a podcast. You can't heal what you don't reveal. So there's just going to be a level of like authenticity and vulnerability that we've all got to get to if we're going to see some improvement. So wow, we've said a lot. We've definitely touched on a lot, but
Yes.
are there any final thoughts or anything that, just that you've been thinking about as it relates to emotional wellness, emotional intelligence that you'd like to share, or, just put a thought on somebody on our brains before we go?
Yeah, for sure. I know we didn't kind of get into the social media part, but I do feel, in my spirit to kind of address that as we wrap up
Hmm.
in a big, broader standpoint. And I guess the feedback or kind of final thoughts I have is number one, whatever you focus on is going to get bigger. So just make a decision today, whether that looks like for this day, week, month, year, of what your focus is, right? And let that be your North Star. Number
Wow.
one, let that be your North Star. And with that being said, the second point to that would be stay focused there, right? Instead of
Mhm.
looking sideways. Instead of looking at what everybody else is doing
Yeah.
or what they're doing in comparison, I feel like that's the bigger enemy, right? Which it shows up in social media or things like that, of that can be a big distraction. Even if you're on a positive trajectory, you can always feel like it's not enough. Or if you're in a really dark place today and you're looking and it feels like everybody else is so happy and doing more than you, like just stop that today. And it doesn't mean you won't have to stop it again tomorrow. You have to continue to practice. I mean, and it's just like any type of workout, you got to build that muscle,
Yeah.
work it out regularly. But those are the final things I would say is that, you know, if you do those things, I think practicing that or having a practice of it is really what we all have to be committed to.
That's so good. And I'm already feeling we're gonna have to do
Yeah.
we're gonna have to do another episode on this, but definitely appreciate definitely the input and the insight on that. There's just so much that we can always be working towards in terms of improving our emotional health and wellness. And you know, there's so much emphasis on physical wellness when there's, our wellness as a whole is including our emotional wellness and health. So definitely appreciate your insight. Great conversation. And we're gonna definitely um, add a part two, maybe part three, because we've got much more to discuss. But definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. And we'll check in at the next episode.
Yeah, be vibrant, right? And be valuable. So thank
Yes.
you guys for tuning in.